Meet Yoshida, a broke, bottom-tier simp who wasted 5 years chasing his boss, only to get his heart drop-kicked into a black hole. Stumbling home like the pathetic loser he is, he finds a high school hottie with mommy milkers that could make Sydney Sweeney jealous, chilling on his doorstep. She's eyeing him like a sugar daddy. Too bad this fool's got nothing but debt, disappointment, and a fridge full of instant noodles. The story begins with Yoshida taking his senior Eri out to a fancy restaurant. She thanks him for the nice dinner, and Yoshida finally gathers the courage to ask if she wants to come back to his place. But Eri drops the shocker that she's already dating someone. Just like that, Yoshida's one-sided crush comes crashing down. Feeling frustrated, he drowns his sorrows at a cheap bar with his friend Hashimoto. After getting drunk and ranting about Eri, Hashimoto leaves him to go home. Grumbling to himself, Yoshida stumbles back alone until he spots a high school girl sitting under a streetlight. Curious, he asks why she's out so late and tells her to go home. She tells him she missed the last train. They go back and forth on where she can stay, but since she's broke, she suddenly offers herself in exchange for a place to sleep. Shocked, Yoshida refuses and tells her to forget about it. She then asks if she can stay for free. At his apartment, the girl comments on how messy it is, but Yoshida shrugs it off. He convinces himself she's not his problem and plans to kick her out in the morning. As he gets into bed, she tries to seduce him again, but he flatly rejects her. When she asks what he does want, he mutters that he just wants some homemade miso soup. The next morning, Yoshida wakes up groggy, only to find the girl still there. The smell of miso soup fills the air. Confused, he panics and asks if anything happened between them, but she just smirks and lets him sweat before reassuring him that nothing did. She hands him the soup, but he scolds her for making it in his house. She reminds him he was the one who asked for it. Annoyed that she keeps calling him old man, he tells her to leave, but she throws his own words back at him. The only thing he remembers from last night, the black panties she was wearing. She finally asks his name, and he tells her. Then he asks for hers. She introduces herself as Sayu and shows him her student ID, revealing she's from Hokkaido and has been on the run for 6 months. When Yoshida asks what she'd do if he kicked her out, she dodges the question. He tells her to get a job, but since it won't be enough to survive on, he decides to let her stay, for now. She can start by cleaning up the apartment. Sayu teases that he's basically letting her live there forever, but he corrects her. It's just until she decides to go back home. Laying down some ground rules, he tells her she's never allowed to seduce him or she's out. At work, Yoshida confesses to Hashimoto about his roommate. Hashimoto looks into it, but no missing person report matches Sayu. Later, as Yoshida walks home, he remembers Hashimoto warning him to send her back before it turns into a problem. While he agrees, he also can't ignore Sayu's situation. That night, Sayu greets him with a cheerful, "Welcome home, Daddy," which instantly annoys him. Even though she made miso soup again, he brought home bentos. He notices she ironed all his clothes, impressed by how good she is at chores. After dinner, when he goes to grab his ashtray, Sayu casually tells him she cleaned it. Taking it outside to smoke, Yoshida finds out that all the men Sayu stayed with before smoked in front of her. That ticks him off. He tells her she should have some damn standards. As he smokes on the balcony, Yoshida realizes he's basically acting like her guardian. He thinks about how the people she stayed with before were scumbags. But in a way, he's not much better. He's letting her stay and spoiling her. The next morning, an article about a man getting arrested for abducting a minor catches Yoshida's attention. Since Sayu only has her school uniform, he takes her shopping for clothes and a futon. She hesitates, worried about how she'll repay him, but Yoshida reassures her. It's just thanks for all the cleaning she's done. Back home, Sayu happily hugs her new futon and jokingly invites Yoshida to sleep with her, making him spit out his drink. She bursts into laughter, saying she didn't mean anything weird. Seeing her laugh, Yoshida tells her she looks cuter that way, which makes her flustered. At work, Hashimoto notices how different Yoshida has been lately. Meanwhile, Yoshida starts wondering why Sayu ran away in the first place. The next morning, Sayu makes a huge breakfast and casually asks why Yoshida rarely shaves. By the end of the meal, Yoshida finally gives in. He grabs a razor and shaves off his stubble. At the mall, Yoshida buys Sayu an expensive moisturizer. While going down an escalator, he asks if she has a phone. She says she threw it in the ocean because her friends from Hokkaido kept calling. Yoshida insists she should have a phone for communication, but Sayu brushes it off, saying she's happy with her orange-scented moisturizer. She smiles at him, but Yoshida can't shake the feeling that her smile doesn't seem genuine. As the sun sets, they return to Yoshida's apartment, both exhausted from carrying heavy shopping bags. Sayu complains, but Yoshida reminds her that his bags were heavier. When Sayu asks if he'll actually read all the books he bought, Yoshida says he will, eventually, and offers to let her read some, as long as she doesn't spoil anything. Sayu agrees but hesitates when trying to ask something, then drops the question. Yoshida notices her fake smile again and tells her to drop the act while she's living with him. Sitting on his bed, Sayu suddenly asks why he's so kind to her. She admits that out of everyone she's met, he's the nicest. In return, she promises to accept his kindness and stop faking smiles. However, she sits beside him and confesses that smiling like that is a habit it'll take time to break. Yoshida understands and advises her to raise her standards. Sayu grabs his hand, saying no one has ever given her so much freedom or choices before, and she wants to make him glad she's there. Yoshida laughs, making Sayu think she said something weird, but he tells her she's actually pretty nice herself. He jokingly suggests she'll have to put more effort into chores and cooking now. Sayu, amused, promises to do just that. At work, Yoshida scolds his coworker, Yuzuha, for submitting buggy code. She worries he'll get fired because of her mistakes, but he tells her he'd just be removed from the project and someone else would have to train her. She quickly promises to fix it. Later that night, after finishing the fixes, Yuzuha is surprised when Yoshida brings her food. They eat together, and Yuzuha tells him he's a good person because most people would give up on someone who keeps messing up, but he only gets mad at her instead. Yoshida bluntly says that's because she never learns. Yuzuha then teases him, noticing he's been shaving more often, and asks if he got a girlfriend. She's heard rumors, likely from Hashimoto. Yoshida admits he confessed to Airi, but got rejected. Yuzuha, oddly relieved, tries to cheer him up, but Yoshida thinks she's just pitying him. After finishing their meal, she thanks him and offers to treat him to beer sometime, which he hesitantly agrees to. Back at the apartment, Sayu is hiding under the blankets, pretending to be upset that Yoshida is late, especially since she made dinner for him. Yoshida apologizes, but she was just messing with him. She hopes he'll eat what she made in the morning. As he drinks beer and eats tofu, he realizes he needs a way to contact her. During lunch, Yoshida and Hashimoto visit a phone store. Hashimoto suggests buying a phone for Sayu, but Yoshida doubts she'll accept it. Hashimoto jokes that Yoshida must really like her, considering how much thought he's putting into it. Yoshida argues that Sayu is a teenager, so he can't just grab any random phone. Hashimoto acknowledges Yoshida's concern, but warns him to think about how he'll handle Sayu in the long run, especially if he starts falling for her. Yoshida dismisses the idea, stating his type. Hashimoto laughs and recommends choosing either black or white for the phone. Back at work, Yoshida is restless, eager to give Sayu her gift, something Hashimoto quickly picks up on. Before he can act, Airi asks Yoshida to talk after work. Hashimoto smirks, saying that rejection is when the real fun begins. That night, Yoshida and Airi have dinner together at a yakiniku restaurant. Yoshida bluntly asks why she invited him after rejecting him. Airi proposes they take turns asking each other questions. She first asks if he has a girlfriend, and though he says no, she doesn't believe him. She points out that she knows his habits from working with him for 5 years. His recent changes in routine suggest something is different. She also mentions how close he's been with Yuzuha lately. Yoshida denies any romantic connection. Then, he confesses that he's loved Airi for 5 years, and still does. What confuses him most is why she even cares, since she rejected him. Airi admits she was concerned about him being with a younger girl, but Yoshida assures her nothing is going on with Yuzuha. As the conversation winds down, Yoshida asks a final ridiculous question. Airi's cup size. She answers, leaving him flustered. On the train home, Yoshida wonders why Airi took him out in the first place. When he arrives, Sayu playfully scolds him for being late again. She notices something's off about him, but he brushes it off. After some pressure, he admits he had dinner with Airi. Sayu hugs him, hoping to cheer him up, then tells him to take a bath because he reeks of grilled meat. Later, as he eats miso soup, he finally gives Sayu his gift, a white cell phone, complete with a matching case. They exchange numbers, and as he does, he recalls Hashimoto's words about falling for Sayu, but he quickly pushes the thought away. Sayu wakes up from a dream about hooking up with an old fling. Weird way to start the day. She shakes off the feeling and glances over at Yoshida, who's still fast asleep, completely unaware. Morning comes, and Yoshida gets ready for work while Sayu, trying to be a decent housemate, promises to make cabbage miso soup for him. Just as he's about to leave, He casually mentions that her hair's a mess in the back. She freezes, then scrambles to fix it, totally embarrassed he even noticed. Left alone, she goes about her usual routine, cleaning, tidying up. But something about the whole situation nags at her. Yoshida never touches her, never asks for anything beyond simple chores. Meanwhile, at work, Yoshida has lunch with his coworker Yuzuha. It's quiet until Endo, another colleague, plops down next to them, already annoyed. Turns out he got stuck with a business trip Yoshida turned down. Suspicious, Endo jokes that Yoshida must have found himself a woman. Yuzuha does not like hearing that. She kicks Yoshida under the table, and when he asks why, she just grumbles that she's mad at everything. Later, after wrapping up for the day, Yuzuha convinces Yoshida to take her to a movie as a reward. As they're heading out, he bumps into Eri, his longtime crush. They exchange quick greetings before going their separate ways. Back home, Sayu can't sit still. What if Yoshida gets a girlfriend? Would he kick her out? He's a nice guy. It's not like he'd have trouble finding someone. And if that happens, would he? Her thoughts get interrupted by a text from him. He'll be home late because of the movie. With nothing else to do, she starts dinner, then decides to take a walk instead. Out on the streets, she finds herself looking for Yoshida, though she has no idea why. Meanwhile, Yoshida and Yuzuha leave the theater, talking about the movie's theme, fated encounters. The conversation takes a turn when he jokingly asks if she's ever had one. Yuzuha smirks and says she has, and she's not planning on letting it go. Before he can react, she suddenly hugs him and says, "What if she's his fated person?" He laughs it off, telling her to quit messing around. What he doesn't know is that Sayu sees everything. Watching him let Yuzuha cling to him like that, when he never even lets her get close, hits her like a punch to the gut. Something ugly bubbles up inside. Before she can even process it, she turns and runs. On his way home, Yoshida walks past the lamppost where he first met her. The thought lingers, does fate even mean anything? When he finally gets back, he finds her phone left behind. His stomach drops. Panic kicks in as he rushes out to find her. Sayu, meanwhile, is sitting on a park bench, still trying to make sense of what she just saw. Why does it bother her so much? Why does it feel so damn unfair? Before she can spiral too hard, Yuzuha shows up. Noticing how out of it she looks, Yuzuha decides to stick around until the last train. They talk, and Sayu admits she didn't run away because of bad parents. She ran because she doesn't believe in unconditional kindness. There's always a catch. Yuzuha gets it. She ran away once too. But instead of wallowing in it, she gives Sayu some advice. If Yoshida really is as kind as she says, then trust him. Be honest. Sayu takes those words to heart, and right then, Yoshida shows up, breathless from searching for her. Relief washes over him as he takes her home. Back at the apartment, Sayu, dressed in just her underwear, decides to test something. She tries to seduce him, just to see if he actually finds her attractive. Yoshida, clearly flustered, admits that yeah, he does. But he still refuses. He won't sleep with someone he doesn't love. That breaks her. She confesses something deeper. Offering her body has always been how she survives. If she's not useful, she gets tossed aside. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But Yoshida just holds her close and tells her something she's never heard before. She doesn't have to offer anything to be wanted. Tears spill down her face. Yoshida tells her she can stay as long as she wants, until she's ready to face her past. For the first time, she feels like she actually belongs. Sayu asks Yoshida if she can get a job, expecting him to say no, but he agrees right away. She doesn't know how to react. She tells him about a nearby store called Comfort, and he says it sounds like a good idea. He thinks meeting people her age might be good for her. On her first day, she gets trained by Asami Yuki, a confident and outgoing senior employee. Asami insists Sayu call her by her first name. When their shift ends, Asami asks where Sayu lives. Sayu vaguely says it's nearby, but Asami gets curious and says she'll visit sometime. Sayu hesitates, mentioning she lives with someone but quickly adds it's not a boyfriend. She says it's more like a brother. Asami doesn't seem convinced and decides to visit anyway. Sayu, panicked, texts Yoshida. He is caught off guard. His coworkers overhear, joke about it, and Irie notices the conversation. When Yoshida gets home, Asami looks him over and calls him a hot older dude. She decides he seems decent enough. To keep things simple, Yoshida makes up a story about being childhood friends with Sayu despite the 9-year age gap. Sayu backs him up when he struggles with details. At dinner, Asami enjoys the food and teases Yoshida about how lucky he is to have Sayu cooking for him. After dinner, she laughs about how small his room is, and their banter entertains Sayu. Before leaving, Asami tells Yoshida to walk her home, leaving Sayu alone. On the way, Asami asks about the lie and what Yoshida's real relationship with Sayu is. He avoids details but firmly says he sees himself as her older brother. Asami seems satisfied and calls him a good guy. Before parting, she gives him some advice. Sayu has different kinds of smiles, and he should pay attention. Yoshida doesn't understand what she means. The next night, Yoshida is about to text Sayu when Airi appears and asks him out again. They go to the same restaurant. She brings up Yuzuha and asks why he turned down the business trip. Instead of answering, he flips it on her and asks why she cares. Caught off guard, Airi blurts out that she likes him. Sayu makes dinner at home, but feels disappointed when Yoshida texts that he won't be coming back early. She replies with a short message but eats alone, feeling empty. At the restaurant, Airi admits she lied about being in a 5-year relationship. She says she felt like she should wait. Yoshida thinks she's messing with him and jokingly suggests they sleep together. Airi freezes before awkwardly admitting she's a virgin. Yoshida quickly apologizes, realizing she's serious. He tells her he won't chase after her, but if she ever really wants to be with him, she should ask him out. She agrees. Later, Sayu sits alone, eating in silence. A painful memory suddenly hits her, and she runs to the bathroom to throw up. Right then, Yoshida texts. He says he's bringing Airi home to meet her. Sayu's heart drops. She thinks this is it. She's getting kicked out. Before she can spiral, Yoshida sends another text. Airi just wants to meet her, nothing more. Sayu exhales, but something inside her still feels uneasy. Yoshida explains his situation with Sayu to Airi on their way back to his apartment. Upon arrival, Airi introduces herself and surprises Sayu with snacks from a convenience store. As they talk, Airi learns Sayu isn't in a romantic relationship with Yoshida. An awkward silence follows when Sayu finds Airi's relief surprising. Sensing the tension, Yoshida excuses himself, and Airi takes the chance to speak with Sayu privately. Sayu sends Yoshida on an errand, leaving her alone with Airi, who bluntly asks how long she plans to stay at Yoshida's place. Meanwhile, Yoshida runs into Yuzuha, who detoured from the station. She questions why he's out late, and upon learning it's for Sayu, she insists on tagging along. Back at the apartment, Sayu avoids answering Airi's question. Airi shares her thoughts on teenage girls and why they're special. Encouraged, Sayu admits she has been running from her problems for 6 months, but secretly wanted someone to tell her to stop. She recounts her struggles before meeting Yoshida, who promised to guide her. Airi chuckles and reassures Sayu that she has found a safe haven, but advises her to treat Yoshida appropriately. Sayu acknowledges she can't live like this forever, and must eventually confront her past. Airi embraces and praises her for her courage. Yoshida, trying to part ways with Yuzuha, is met with resistance when she asks to stay at his place. He refuses, sparking a minor argument. Yuzuha questions whether he'd refuse Airi the same way and, when Yoshida hesitates, admits she stalked him that night. She apologizes, but Yoshida shrugs it off. Back at the apartment, Sayu asks Airi if she loves Yoshida. Airi laughs before confirming that she does. Sayu, pleased, notes that Yoshida will get the woman he wants. Outside the store, Yuzuha accuses Yoshida of acting illogically, believing he brought Airi home for the night. Yoshida denies it, but when asked if he still loves Airi, he admits he does. Yuzuha points out that he's housing a teenage girl while loving another woman, creating an impossible situation. She questions whether his love for Airi is genuine or just admiration. Yoshida insists it's real, but Yuzuha warns that being too nice means never getting what he truly wants. Returning home, Yoshida finds Airi applying makeup to Sayu. When asked for his opinion, his sheepish response earns playful criticism from both. Later, Airi warns Yoshida that Sayu is emotionally unstable and will eventually unload her feelings on him. Confident in Yoshida's ability, she trusts he'll handle it well. Elsewhere, Asami discusses a new hire with a coworker, someone Sayu knows named Kyoya. Sayu arrives at the break room and notices Kyoya Yaguchi's name on the work schedule. When Kyoya enters, they instantly recognize each other. He's surprised, but Sayu denies knowing him. Kyoya, unfazed, states he never forgets someone he spent the night with, leaving Sayu shocked. Asami enters, reads the tension, and kicks Kyoya out, then consoles Sayu. After work, Sayu thinks she's avoided Kyoya until he confronts her. He insists on visiting her place, blackmailing her with their past. Shaken, Sayu agrees but notifies Yoshida. At Yoshida's apartment, Kyoya starts civil, but soon turns aggressive. Sayu slaps him, but he pins her down. Just then, Yoshida bursts in, kicks Kyoya out, and questions him. Kyoya reveals Sayu once stayed with him and warns Yoshida about the responsibility he's taking on. Yoshida, undeterred, vows to guide Sayu. Later, he reassures Sayu he wants her to live a normal life, making her tearfully grateful. The next day at work, Asami notices Sayu's distress and confronts Kyoya. He admits asking Sayu for sex, but omits details. Asami smacks him and demands an apology. Once alone, Kyoya gives a half-hearted apology, and Sayu warns him not to cross the line again. That evening, Sayu stays over at Asami's. They visit Asami's parents' house, impressing Sayu with its grandeur. Asami reveals her father is a politician, her mother a lawyer, and her own dream of becoming an author, despite their expectations. At a stargazing spot, she shares how her father once comforted her there. Sayu, moved, opens up about her past, and Asami encourages her. The next day, Yoshida returns early with food and apologizes for not protecting her. Sayu insists he did, and for the first time, she wants to think about her future. Yoshida promises to help her, and Sayu, overjoyed as ever, hugs him, welcoming him home. Sayu and Asami talk about whether Yoshida will let Asami visit. He agrees but warns her not to show up too often. While shopping, a black car parks nearby for a moment before driving off. Asami says this happens a lot, but Sayu starts feeling uneasy. At Yoshida's apartment, Sayu helps Asami study. A flashback shows Sayu telling Yoshida she wants to stay with him longer. In the present, Asami asks what she was thinking about, but Sayu dodges the question, saying she was just thinking about dinner. Asami teases her for acting like a housewife and suggests getting a special bento. At the IT company, Yuzuha watches Yoshida get a text from Sayu and feels jealous that she doesn't have his number. Later, she invites Irie to lunch and starts asking about Yoshida. Irie admits she knows about Sayu and wouldn't push for a relationship if Yoshida chose someone else. Yuzuha doesn't like Irie's passive approach and accuses her of being scared. Irie says it's up to Yoshida to decide, and that, even though she loves him, she feels like her efforts wouldn't change anything. Annoyed, Yuzuha makes a rude remark before leaving. That evening, Yuzuha asks Yoshida to see a movie, but he says no, mentioning Sayu's special dinner. Disappointed, she demands his number. Yoshida, not used to giving out his contact info, agrees. Yuzuha texts him right away and laughs at his childish response. Later, Yoshida finds out the special dinner is katsudon, a dish linked to winning. Sayu tells him he should win against himself. Yoshida thinks about how he's his own worst enemy, but also believes he's only ever done what he felt was right to help her. The next day, while cleaning, Sayu tries to push Yoshida onto the bed, saying chores are her job. They end up falling on each other before Yoshida gives up and goes to shower. While he's gone, Sayu finds a box in his closet with a note from his mother and his high school album. She finds a picture of Yoshida with a girl he used to admire. The memory of that girl calling him clingy lingers in her mind. At Comfort Market, Sayu works with Kyoya when the black car shows up again. Seeing Sayu panic, Kyoya sends her to the back room. The car's passenger, Kazuto Ogiwara, CEO of Ogiwara Foods, asks Kyoya about Sayu. Later, Sayu walks home, thinking about how she'll have to return home now that her brother is around. A text from Yoshida lets her know he'll be late, making her sigh. While out shopping, she bumps into Yuzuha, and the two chat until Sayu suddenly spots her brother and panics, hiding behind Yuzuha. After learning about Sayu's situation, Yuzuha takes her to a karaoke bar, where they unwind with drinks. Sayu wants to text Yoshida, but hesitates, unsure of what to say. Yuzuha suggests she be honest, but seeing Sayu's reluctance, she texts Yoshida their location and invites him to join if he wants. At the IT company, Yoshida wraps up work as Hashimoto suggests he head home to see Sayu. However, he's thrown off by the vague text from Sayu about having a good time. Meanwhile, Sayu and Yuzuha finish karaoke and talk about Sayu's situation. Yuzuha bluntly asks if Sayu is on the run for committing a crime, but Sayu denies it. Yuzuha doesn't push further, but repeats Kyoya's warning that Sayu doesn't have much time left. Sayu acknowledges this, but says she was out shopping to fulfill one of Yoshida's conditions for staying at his place. Yuzuha then points out how connected Sayu and Yoshida have become, and questions what Sayu would do if they were separated. She asks Sayu if Yoshida is just helping her, or if there's something more between them. Sayu stammers, but Yuzuha interrupts, reminding her that she had a goal when she ran away. The real question now is whether Sayu has achieved what she wanted, and if going back with her pursuers will be worth it. When Sayu fails to answer, Yuzuha apologizes and advises her to figure out what she truly wants. Yoshida arrives to take Sayu home, inviting Yuzuha to join them, but she declines. Before leaving, Yoshida promises to take Yuzuha to a movie someday. Once they're gone, Yuzuha breaks down, heartbroken that Yoshida only sees Sayu in a way he never looks at her. On the way home, Sayu asks if Yoshida wants to do anything, but he has no idea. They come across a summer festival poster and decide to go. The next night, Sayu wears a yukata, making Yoshida too shy to look at her until she forces him to. He calls her pretty, making her flustered. They enjoy the festival, sharing cotton candy and holding hands after Sayu nearly trips. Watching the fireworks, Yoshida realizes he wouldn't have come without Sayu. Lost in thought, he panics when he notices Sayu is gone, only for her to return moments later. She apologizes when Yoshida admits he feared she had disappeared. After a heartfelt conversation, Sayu confesses that Yoshida is the only man she ever gave her real name to. The next day, her brother Issa arrives at Yoshida's apartment, ready to take Sayu home. Sayu's past is a storm she can't outrun. One day, she overhears a group of girls bragging about teaching someone a lesson, and quickly realizes they're talking about Yuko. Rushing into the bathroom, she finds Yuko drenched, humiliated, and broken. Sayu immediately wants to fight back, but Yuko stops her. Unwilling to back down, Sayu grabs Asami's hand, vowing never to betray her and insisting they stand together. In that moment, Yuko embraces Sayu, but looking back, Sayu admits that this was her greatest mistake. Days later, on the school rooftop, Sayu finds Yuko standing beyond the guardrail. What starts as a painful confession turns into a final farewell. Yuko blames Sayu for ruining her life. Before stepping off the edge, she leaves Sayu with one last message. So keep on smiling, okay? Sayu watches in horror as Yuko vanishes from sight. The weight of that moment crushes her. The media swarms her family home, but Sayu's mother keeps them at bay. Inside, the real storm brews. Sayu sits across from her mother, who coldly reprimands her for Yuko's death. Sayu apologizes, but when her mother outright asks if she killed Yuko, something inside her snaps. She lashes out, defending their friendship and condemning her mother's heartlessness. Feeling suffocated in that house, she storms out, only to be stopped by her brother, Issa. When she explains why she's leaving, he doesn't argue. Instead, he takes her to Asahikawa Station, hands her an envelope with 300,000 yen, and tells her to reach out if she needs help. Sayu thanks him, but never looks back. The money runs out fast, and loneliness gnaws at her. Even Issa's kindness feels like pity, so she cuts ties with him too. That's when she meets a man who offers her a place to stay. At first, she believes it's genuine kindness, but a few days in, he makes his real intentions clear. Sayu gives in, letting herself believe she has no other choice. That night marks the beginning of a cycle, staying with men in exchange for a roof over her head, until she meets Yoshida. Now, back in the present, Sayu lays it all bare. She calls herself stupid, unable to even remember the name of the first man she gave herself to. The weight of her past lingers as Asami and Yoshida step onto the balcony to process it all. Yoshida knows Sayu will have to leave soon. Hashimoto tries to be positive about it, but Yoshida isn't feeling great. He figures her parents must be awful if she ran away, but Hashimoto reminds him that at least her brother Issa is on her side. That night, Issa meets Yoshida outside his apartment to apologize for being rude before. They sit on a park bench and talk about Sayu's rough family situation. Issa admits Yoshida might be the closest thing Sayu has ever had to a real parent. Yoshida isn't sure how to react. Issa thanks him for taking care of her and reminds him that she doesn't have much time left here. He hopes Yoshida will be by her side until the end. At the apartment, Sayu admits she's caused a lot of trouble and that she's scared to go home. She knows she has to face it, but that doesn't make it easier. The next day, Yuzuha overhears Yoshida talking about helping a coworker with overtime. Sayu gives Yoshida a notebook full of recipes so he can stop living off convenience store food. He appreciates the thought. Later, Hashimoto asks him to lunch, but Yoshida is too busy. Hashimoto warns him not to overdo it, but Yoshida doesn't seem to care. That evening, Sayu brings Yoshida to a hill where Asami once took her. She looks back on everything that's happened and thanks him for helping her realize her mistakes before it was too late. Meeting him changed her life, but now she wants to move forward. She's ready to stand on her own and hopes Yoshida will support her when she leaves. He promises he will. At work, Yoshida, Hashimoto, and Yuzuha talk about Sayu's departure. Yuzuha suggests he follow her to Hokkaido, but he says it's not his place. Yuzuha points out that whether he goes or not, Sayu's situation won't change. Yoshida doesn't budge. Then, Asami calls, panicked because Sayu isn't answering her phone. Hashimoto quickly covers for Yoshida at work, and they rush out. Yuzuha offers to finish Yoshida's tasks. While driving, Hashimoto tells Yoshida he's been using work as a distraction instead of dealing with his emotions. When they arrive, Sayu is safe with Asami and Airi. She just wanted to see Yoshida's workplace and walk home with him. That night, Sayu asks to sleep beside Yoshida one last time. She wonders if she would have been normal if he had been her father. Yoshida reminds her he's just the guy who took her in. Still, she says his place felt warm and kind. Then, Yoshida tells her his final surprise, he's going with her to Hokkaido. Sayu is stunned. As Yoshida pats her head, he tells her she shouldn't go home alone. Overwhelmed, she hugs him. She's relieved that she won't have to face it by herself. Sayu says her goodbyes. Then she's off, on a flight to Hokkaido, Yoshida right there with her. She knocks out mid-flight, and Yoshida throws a blanket over her. Issa side-eyes him, clearly surprised he decided to come along. Yoshida keeps it simple. Sayu needs backup, and after everything, he owes her that much. He's not about to let her walk into this mess alone. Issa lets him know this ain't gonna be a smooth ride, but figures having him around might help Sayu keep it together. When Sayu wakes up and sees Yoshida still by her side, he just shrugs, like turning back ain't even an option. She laughs at how stubborn he is, and he just tells her he's got her, no matter what. As they chat, she admits she doesn't fly much, but she kinda likes it. They land and get a ride to Sapporo, which throws Yoshida off. He thought they were heading straight to Asahikawa. Issa explains he's gotta grab something from his company's branch. He notices Sayu looking lost in her thoughts and tells her to take a breather with Yoshida, which gets a small smile out of her. They stop by a cafe, and Sayu lights up, ordering a green tea olé like it's the best thing ever. Turns out she's never even been to a cafe before. Watching some girls laughing outside, she remembers how her mom never let her stay out late, never let her just exist like a normal kid. The idea of sitting in a cafe, sipping a fancy drink, that was a dream. But now, sitting across from Yoshida, she actually feels good. Yoshida leans in, asks if she's scared to go home. She admits she is, but knowing he's here makes it a little easier. Their drinks show up and they sit in comfortable silence. That night, Sayu asks to see Asahikawa Dairoku High. The second they pull up, she gets tense, but she won't back down. They sneak in, dodging security cameras, and Yoshida cracks a joke about breaking the law. Sayu smirks, reminding him he's done worse. She leads him up to the rooftop, but the door's locked. Not about to be stopped, she squeezes through a window, shaky but determined, and tells him to follow. The rooftop hits her like a brick wall. Memories of Yuko flood in. Sayu stumbles to a bench, barely holding it together. She blames herself for Yuko's death, convinced she didn't do enough. Yoshida shuts that down, tells her Yuko cared about her, that the real enemy was the bullying, not her. Sayu breaks, admitting she wanted Yuko to stay, but was scared that saying it out loud would make it seem like she was blaming her. Yoshida wipes her tears, tells her it's time to stop carrying this guilt alone. Sayu cries, but for the first time in a long time, she starts letting it go. With the wind brushing past, she whispers that she'll see Yuko again someday. Leaving the school, Sayu promises to buy Yoshida a new handkerchief, but he waves it off, just asking if she's good. She keeps it real, not yet, but she's ready to face what's next. They get back in Issa's car and roll up to the Ojiwara house. The second Sayu steps inside, her mother slaps her across the face. Inside, they gather at the dining table, where Sayu's mother launches into a lecture about how Sayu's disappearance caused more trouble than when she was home. Sayu, silent at first, finally speaks up, accusing her mother of never trying to understand her. When Sayu asks if she remembers the last words she said before she left, her mother has no answer, proving to Sayu that she never cared in the first place. Her mother brushes it off, claiming Sayu ran away just to spite the family, but Sayu firmly refutes this, saying she left to escape the blame and neglect. As the tension builds, Yoshida starts to understand why Sayu never wanted to return. The conversation shifts to Yoshida, and Sayu's mother sneers at him for taking care of Sayu. Yoshida remains calm, stating he understood the risks, but she continues to belittle him. Sayu, unable to hold back, defends him, explaining that Yoshida gave her more support than her own mother ever did. But then, her mother coldly states that she never should have given birth to Sayu. The words cut through the air like a knife, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Sayu breaks down in tears, and Yoshida, barely holding back his rage, almost throws his tea at her mother. but stops himself and drinks it instead. Yoshida then speaks with deep conviction, reflecting on how no one chooses to be born, but must learn to take responsibility for their lives. He declares that, while he would take care of Sayu himself, it's not his role, it's her mother's. Then, to everyone's shock, Yoshida kneels before Sayu's mother, begging her to care for Sayu until she becomes an adult. Issa follows suit, bowing his head as well. Faced with their unexpected plea, Sayu's mother cracks under the pressure and breaks down. Outside, Yoshida and Sayu sit in the cool night air. Yoshida is overwhelmed, admitting that hearing her mother reject her so cruelly was worse than he imagined. Sayu, though hurt, thanks him, knowing he stood up for her when she couldn't. They both cry, finding comfort in each other's presence as they watch the stars. Sayu tells Yoshida that when he knelt for her, she felt as if she was finally forgiven. She reassures him that she'll be okay on her own now, and he, believing in her, wishes her the best. Later, Issa informs them that Sayu will be allowed to stay home until graduation, as long as she avoids trouble. Sayu's mother surprisingly softened because of Yoshida's actions. Before leaving, Yoshida speaks to her one last time, apologizing for his earlier outburst. She coldly dismisses it, but asks why he went so far for Sayu. His answer is simple. It's because he met her that day. With that, Sayu's mother agrees to talk things over with her daughter, and Yoshida prepares to return to Tokyo. After leaving the dining room, Yoshida spots Sayu with her brother, Issa. She doesn't stop to talk, just walks right past him, straight to her mother. Then, to Yoshida's surprise, Sayu kneels and apologizes, admitting she ran away out of frustration, even though she knew it would hurt them. Her mother, still stubborn, refuses to apologize, but Sayu doesn't let that stop her. She asks if she's truly the only parent she has. A tear slips down her mother's cheek before she confirms it. Then she lays down one rule. Sayu has to finish school before doing whatever she wants. Sayu thanks her. Later, she tells Yoshida she finally had a real conversation with her mom. He praises her for it, unaware that Issa is eavesdropping with a knowing smile. That night, Yoshida struggles to sleep until Sayu sneaks into his room. It's their last night together, and she doesn't want it to end just yet. She asks if he really believes she can handle life without him. Yoshida doesn't hesitate. Of course she can. She's strong. But then she makes a bold request. She wants to make love just once, so she won't forget him. Yoshida, ever the responsible adult, refuses. Their time together wasn't about romance or family. It was something different, something enough to be remembered as it is. Sayu cries, calling him mean, and clings to him. Yoshida just chuckles, teasing her for being a crybaby. Later, as she drifts off to sleep, he watches over her from a chair, knowing this is their final night together. The next day, Issa and Sayu take Yoshida to the airport. Before he leaves, Issa pulls him aside and tries to offer money for his airfare, but Yoshida waves it off, telling him to use it to buy Sayu some new clothes instead. For the first time, Issa thanks him sincerely, admitting that fate must have brought them together. They shake hands, parting on good terms. At the gate, Sayu lets it all out. She's glad she ran away, otherwise she never would have met Yoshida. He agrees. Then, she confesses her love. But Yoshida, ever the realist, gently turns her down, saying he prefers older women. She pouts, then asks if she'd have a chance when she's older. Yoshida just smirks and tells her he'd be too old by then. Instead, he urges her to treasure their time together but keep moving forward. Sayu, teary-eyed, holds onto his hands, promising to meet him again someday. With that, they part ways. Yoshida boards his plane, and Sayu returns to Issa's car. That evening, Yoshida finds a note, Sayu's recipe book, and one of his shirts, still carrying her scent. He tries making miso soup but finds it lacking. One taste is all it takes for the weight of everything to hit him. He leans back, staring at the ceiling, and whispers to himself, "I'm not okay." 2 years later, Yoshida is still working at the IT company, now helping Yuzuha with her project. Irie invites them to dinner, but he declines, having other plans. Yuzuha reminds him he still owes her a date, leaving him baffled. Later that night, while walking home, he chats with Asami on the phone, just casual talk. Then, at the same lamppost where it all began, he sees her, standing there waiting. They reenact their first meeting, bringing their journey full circle. And this is where our story ends.